everyone. Welcome to another Digital Photo Mentor Photo Editing Live. I'm Darlene, and today we are supposed to be doing harvest images, but we didn't get any submitted. So other than this one that I have, which I believe is Deb's, I'll show you how I did this one. And then I'm going to go back and do some landscape photos that we had left over. So welcome from wherever you're joining in. If you are new, thanks for joining. Let us know where you're coming from and how you found the channel. So we've got some regulars: Stephanie, Debbie, Marguerite, Mickey, Stephanie. Too late, Stephanie. I can't download and stuff while I'm live, so we'll worry about that one later. We've got lots of other images to do, so not to worry. Kelly. So I'm going to get started right away. But before I do, I want to let you know about the time and date change. We're going to be changing to Sunday after next week. So next week, which is October, I have to look at a calendar, 4th. Can't believe it's October already. Next week, October 4th, same time. Okay, so same time, same place next week. Then the following week, we will not do October 11th. We will skip the Wednesday and go to the Sunday. So the next two dates, put in your calendars, October 4th and October 15th. Okay. The time on the 15th is probably going to be earlier, about maybe 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So that's 4 p.m. Eastern. I'm not sure what time that is in Europe. Maybe an hour earlier. We may even do 1 p.m. So we want to try and pick up some of the people that want to watch from Europe, because during the summer, this time for them is the middle of the night. So unfortunately, we're going to be switching over and losing those of you down under, unless you want to join us really early. So like 1 in the morning or something like that. So put those dates in your calendar anyways, and we'll let you know the time for the 15th next week to be confirmed. But dates are 4th, and then we move to the Sunday on the 15th. 1 p.m. is 8 p.m. UK. Okay, so we could do 2 p.m. And then I wonder what time that is if somebody could do a calculation in the Australia, New Zealand. Probably a bit too late for them. So I'm going to switch over to this view here. Hey, Paul, welcome. Thanks for joining. Watched my videos a lot. Awesome. I'm glad you could make it live. We're supposed to be doing harvest photos today, and I didn't get any submitted, so we're going to be doing landscape after I do this harvest one. All right. Okay, so this is the edited version. You can see the original here, and I did the edits in Luminar, even though this image was submitted by Deb. And you usually, I think she's here. She usually uses Lightroom, I believe. So I could be wrong, but I marked her image as Lightroom. But I chose to do it in Luminar because see that big white sky up there? I wanted to get rid of that, and I knew that I could do that with the Luminar Neo sky replacement. Now, I could do that in Photoshop as well. So all of the things that I did in Luminar, you could do in Photoshop, but you cannot do in Lightroom. You can't swap a sky out in Lightroom. You can't apply a LUT per se. Okay, so those are the things that I did here inside of Luminar. So what you can do is use a combination of Lightroom and Luminar, though, and use Luminar as a plugin. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that. Okay. So let me just get out of full frame mode here. So I'm going to do the starting edit in Lightroom, pardon me. If I get myself tongue-tied between the two, it's like they're both L's. So I just have to untie my tongue and get it right. So I'm going to do the first part here in Lightroom. We're in Lightroom. So go to Develop Module. Now there's a little, see this little, I got to turn my cursor point on. There we go. See this little sort of looks like a flash or a lightning bolt over here? If you see that, click it, because what it means is the image, when you imported it, there's now a newer raw processing version for Lightroom. And do you want to update the image to utilize that? So I'm going to say yes, right? You can review the changes, and you can tell it not to show this ever again, this pop-up. But I can also update all of the images in the film strip. Okay, so recently I did an update to Lightroom, and it'll just update them all. Okay, and I haven't edited them, so I'm not needing a before and after, right? As usual, I'm going to start with the camera profiles. And in this case, I'm looking for something. The idea that I had in my head when I saw this image was I kind of wanted it to look a bit more antique-y, more sort of a sepia tone with that orange really punching out. Okay, so that's kind of what I was looking for. Ooh, look at the orange there. That maybe is a little too far. There's something that's a little faded. And we can also look at the vintage ones because these ones tend to have that kind of a look, right? Like that's totally different. Okay. These are similar to using a LUT, right? That's actually not too bad. So we could use this and go with something like this, and then just change the sky, right? That one gives it a different type of antique look. And when you dial these in, let's say I like this one, for example, you can actually increase it or dial it down a little bit. So you could say, well, I like this effect, but I'm just going to bring it down to like 75%, right? So if you bring it all the way back down, you end up at Adobe Color, right? So you can see what this is doing, and you can even go as far as 200, right? 200%, I don't know, amount, it's amount anyways, okay? So same here. This one kind of makes a matte look, and you lose a lot of detail in the background, but it kind of looks spooky for Halloween, right? So this one I don't mind either, and it really brings out those pumpkins. So I might even do this one. Now you'll notice that when I do that, can you see the histogram? It's pushing the edges in, right? So if I undo this one to 0, see how it's clipping? It's right on the edge, over here on the right. It's right on the edge, meaning there's some whites clipping, there's some highlights clipping, right up here in the sky. I'm using my keyboard shortcut J to see that. Right? If I bring this LUT or this camera profile up, you can see that it's tucked in on both sides. What that means is there's now not going to be pure white or pure black. It's what's called a matte look. Okay, so you get this sort of faded out black looking type of thing. And even if I go in here and let's say, okay, I'm going to go to the tone curve, even if I increase the blacks, you see I never get to the edge of the graph. Okay, so if you like that kind of thing, great, do it. But if you apply the camera profile and then you realize, oh, I don't want that type of, cutting in on the edges, you can either just dial it back a bit or pick a different one. You'll notice that this one does the same thing. So a lot of these vintage ones do that same kind of effect, right? So if I don't want to lose that, I could go with one of these neutral ones like this and make that faded out look a different way, okay? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go with camera profile neutral, right? And I can bring the highlights down a little bit. You can see that there is a little bit of sky there. Right. But I'm actually going to leave it bright because if I'm going to do a sky replacement, it's actually going to be easier for the program to find the sky if it's a little brighter. Okay. I just want to make sure that these leaves aren't faded out, right? Because you see how the highlights are, you've lost the leaves. So I'm going to bring that down so I've got the leaves like so, right? And now we've solved the clipping problem, okay? So if I turn on clippings, there's detail in the sky. It should replace just fine. Okay. I'm going to do shift double click on the blacks and bringing up the exposure slider. Remember that is midtones. Okay. So that's going to brighten this part. Okay. And I definitely want more black. Okay. So I'm going to use my Alt Option key, make sure it's black in the middle, and then a little bit of clarity. I usually don't go very high with the clarity when I'm doing it here because I'm going to apply it more to the pumpkins locally. Okay. We can also play with the white balance. If we shift it to cloudy white balance, you'll notice that the whole thing becomes more yellow, right? If we shift it more the opposite way and we go to tungsten, you get blue, right? Daylight is kind of in the middle, right? But if we want it a little bit warmer, we can go more towards cloudy. And all those settings are doing is changing these two numbers here. So you can always just dial it in where you want. Okay. So I do want it to look kind of like fall. So I like it a little bit warmer. maybe less magenta color, something like that. Okay. And now once I've done that, I'm going to make sure that where are we here? The lens corrections are done. So under profile, you can enable the lens profile and also chromatic aberration. So where chromatic aberration will show up, if you have any, is along the edges of things. And I actually don't see any here. So it looks like it's pretty decent, right? This is what kind of a lens? 16 to 50. Okay, so that's a really good lens. Okay, I think that's a Sony lens. So high quality lens, you won't get as much of that type of chromatic aberration. So that looks good. I'm going to use a preset to apply a vignette, and all that does is adjust the settings here in the post crop vignette. So you can see turn it off and on. You can see what that's doing. Okay. Now I want to really punch out these pumpkins. Okay. So I'm going to use a mask and I'm going to do select subject, and hopefully it picks up the pumpkins. Okay. Now the problem is it's also picked up a good chunk of the barn, which I don't want. So I'm going to have to either subtract all of the barn, or I could just try again and do select object, which I think I'm going to do. So I'm going to undo, and instead I'm going to choose object. When you're doing choose object, you have two choices. You can either draw an X or paint over the thing you want to select. I'm going to try an X first. Okay, now you don't have to be perfect. You just have to say, look, the thing I want to select is within this box. Right, now look at, we're much closer. Okay, all I need to do is get rid of a little bits over here. So I'm just going to do subtract, use a brush, and just paint it away. Right, so I'm erasing. Okay, so I chose subtract, and I'm just getting rid of the bits that it selected outside of the wheelbarrow. Right, and I lowered you notice that I lowered the feather, right, because I want to be able to get close to the edge without it fading into the wheelbarrow. Okay, so now I've got that selected. My selection is good. I can just either call it subject or wheelbarrow pumpkins. And what do I want to do? Okay, I want to add some texture. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what's happening. I want to add some clarity. And I'm going to add some black. Okay, maybe even highlights down a little bit. See the tops of the pumpkins a little bit bright, so just darken them a little bit. Let's see what that's doing. Okay, so see the texture coming out on the tops of those guys? Okay. Now that I'm happy with that, we can do an inverse mask. Okay, click on the three dots, duplicate and invert. So now we have everything opposite, right? And in this case, I'm going to bring the texture down a little bit and just darken everything. Okay. Even by bringing the black down, okay, you'd think that exposure, but black's going to give me more of that rich dark color in the background. Okay, so I'm going to go more with the black than I do with the exposure. Okay, so let's see what that's doing. Okay. If I look at how the masks are doing overall, see how it's bringing the pumpkins out? Like so. And what I might do is do a second one where I just want to darken the bottom here, okay? But I don't want to get the wheelbarrow. So what I might do is I'm going to do a linear gradient. And I'm going to come up from the bottom. Oh, my dots aren't showing. There we go. If your dots aren't showing, just click H on your keyboard. That's what I just did. Okay. Just means hide and show. Okay, so see how I can darken the grass a little bit down here in the bottom. But I don't want to darken the wheelbarrow, so I can subtract. And once again, I'll just do subtract object, and it'll get the wheelbarrow. Okay, so now if I hit O on my keyboard, you can see that it's got the grass and not the pumpkin and the wheelbarrow. Okay. So I can take it up as high as I want, and it will not apply to the wheelbarrow. Something like that. Okay, so far, this is what I've done. And now I want to deal with that sky. Okay. I think I cropped the other one a little bit. Let me just go have a look. I cropped it to fit into the video aspect ratio to make the featured image. But what I might do in terms of cropping for this one is a little bit off of the right-hand side, because you always want to have more space in front of the subject if it's looking a particular way. And I'm going to come back to any questions you guys have here. And the wheelbarrow is kind of facing that way, right? If you were going to wheel it, it's going to go this way. So if anything, I'm going to take a little bit of space off this side, and I might come in a little bit off the top. I really want to see that top part of that roof. And since we don't have it, the new stuff, the generative AI, we could totally do that in Photoshop, or the new Luminar will have it. Right now, we don't have that in Lightroom at all. Or I can just come down a little bit so that it's a little bit more obvious that I'm cropping into it. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Okay, now the wheelbarrow is a little more prominent. Okay, do we want to flip it the other way? I do flips a lot so that the image is going this way. How do we like it? Flipped or not flipped? Let's see. Shelly says, Paul, where are you in the Philly area? And let's see. Selecting the subject in Luminar would have worked better on the pumpkins, except there is not a select subject in Luminar yet, Raymond. That's something that's been suggested and requested. They don't have select subject or select background yet. I have definitely suggested it to them. Kelly says, no, not flipped, not flipped. Leave it. Oh, that's the name of your town. Okay. I thought he was saying, leave it alone. But that's your town. Okay, so I will not flip it then. But think in terms of like what happens if, and then try it, right? You can always make a virtual copy in Lightroom and look at them side by side and see which one you like better. Okay. Now, because I'm only going to do a sky replacement here, I'm not going to take this to Photoshop or do the whole smart object thing. I'm just going to go straight into Luminar Neo. So I'm going to right click it, edit in Luminar Neo. And I just installed the new version. Okay. So fingers crossed, nothing goes wrong. I haven't tested anything yet. So there is the new part of the blur tool. There is now a tilt shift, which might be kind of interesting. We could play with that. And also, what else is new? The neon glow tool. Marguerite says there's something odd about the flipped version. Can't put her finger on it. Okay, let me come back here. Question that Edward had about masking. Did I cancel the mask by clicking on the mask emblem? Yes. So when you're in Lightroom, just to go back to Lightroom here, you can just open the masks here and close them here. So same button. Okay. Open, close. Okay, where are we? I've got two versions of Luminar open now. Okay, so now I'm in the plugin version, okay? And you know that it's the plugin version because it says apply here. And I don't have the, you see that I don't have the other stuff like the catalog. So you don't see the HDR and the focus stacking and all that stuff, okay? So if you need to do HDR focus stacking, you open your images into Luminar differently, okay? You can use those extensions, but you just open them differently. Okay, so my first thing was I wanted to do the sky replacement and then maybe apply a lot, right? But while I'm here, let's just see what they are suggesting or what Luminar is suggesting in terms of a preset, because maybe there's something here that will do the trick, right? So as I hover over, is there one that grabs me? Ooh, that's kind of spooky, right? And keep in mind that if you apply one, right, this one, for example, you can undo it Or you can also scale it back. So you can say, well, I like it, but not quite that much. Unfortunately, we can't stack presets because one overwrites another at this point, but you can dial them back if you don't like the full effect. That one's kind of neat, right? It gives you almost like a faded sepia tone, which is kind of what I was going for, but I want a little bit more of the orange, right? So I kind of like this faded grasslands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply it. And before I dial it back, I'm actually just going to see what it's doing. So when you apply a preset, you can go into here and see what it's doing and then decide to dial it back. So for example, right, this one somewhere is dialing back the color, right? So that's interesting. Something got changed there. Let me undo. Something got changed there. I don't know why it's shifted that to pink. Ah, there we go. Okay, so it shifted these colors here, which is bizarre. And then this mood was applied afterwards. So that's interesting. So tricky to dial that one back, right? If it was using the color tool to desaturate, then it would be easier to do that. Okay. Interesting way of applying things. Let's see if there's another one that might apply. So it thinks urban style because of the building, like it analyzes, right, what's in your image. Toronto, interesting. Okay, New York is actually kind of cool, and it's giving me that matte look again that I like. So I might go with this one. Let's go with something like that. See how I like that. Give me a little bit of punch as well. So I've dialed that one back to about 70. Okay. Then if I want to see what it's doing, right, I could see that it's doing some face, which obviously I don't need because there's no faces in this picture, right? It's done some develop, it's doing some enhance, it's done some color adjustments. You can learn a lot about the program just by opening up the edits when you've done a preset and see, okay, what is it doing exactly? Okay, it's done some color harmony. Look at that. It's really working nicely on the oranges for sure. Okay, it's punched up the details. So I really like what this is doing. And as a matter of fact, I might take it farther, right? So we could really punch up the details a bit more and then just mask it onto the subject. I'm just going to use a radial gradient. And it doesn't even have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be exactly on the wheelbarrow. Maybe a little bit less fade, like so. There we go. Something like that. Okay. So I'm getting I want it opposite. I want it on the wheelbarrow. But you'll notice under the masking, like there isn't a select subject, right? If I do mask AI, it doesn't come up with subject. That's not one of the options. Okay? So see how that's just selecting the pumpkins? So I like that. Now, if I like that mask and position, I can copy it. Okay. Let's see, it jumped around to super contrast. So it's done some, it's not doing all that much. High key, doesn't look like that one was applied, but sometimes they will set it to 0 in a preset. And then all you have to do is dial it up. See that? So it sets some objects, it sets some settings here for you, and we can just dial it up a little bit. Okay, now we've got this mood or a LUT. I can decide to apply it more if I want. And finally, it has applied some toning. Okay, so the toning is giving us, looks like sort of a yellow to the highlights and a blue to the shadows, which is interesting. Okay, so let's see what that's doing. It's very subtle, right? I could actually take it farther and give it more saturation. Now you could see it really coming to life. If I want, you see how it's got blue in the shadows? So I don't actually want the blue. I'm just going to dial it down. I like the yellow. Keep it warm. Keep everything warm and antique-y kind of looking. Okay? And then all I have to do is my sky. But I might come and do another vignette here as well, because the vignette that you can do, I'll do that after I do the sky. The vignette you can do in Luminar, you can position it, okay? So you can't do that in Lightroom. You would have to do a radial gradient, okay? Okay, so now sky replacement. So the sky, I remember I wanted something fairly orange. I don't remember which sky I chose. Let me see if there's one in my sky pack. I wanted something fairly orangey. I'm just going to apply one and then see when it pops in here if it's orange enough. We can also make it more orange. Is it applying yet? No, it should come into here. Okay, so we're seeing some color there. We can move it around a little bit. Not so much orange. Let me try this one. Okay, now we can do some things like warm it up, brighten it. I don't want it to be quite so dark. And then I can also position it, right? So I can move it around. I'll move it down a little bit because it's kind of not getting that bottom corner right here. Oh, and doing so, we got more color. See that? So now I can sort of play with positioning and get something that gives a little bit of a little something, okay? I might defocus it one or so. And the other sky that I chose was a lot more orange. Right? We can look at that as well. I think I chose one from one of Matt's packs. I've got a lot of different sunsets that I've gotten with, for example, if you have an X membership with Skylum, that one's got some orange. I want something that's really, really orange. We can make it more orange. Dramatic. Please, whatever you do, don't use this one. It's under dramatic sunset. It's the most used sunset ever, and it's just so recognizable as such. So just don't use it. Stormy skies. I've got all kinds of stuff. Stunning skies. Oh, here's some orange. We should be able to get some orange here. There we go. Okay, so I'm looking to try and complement the sky. Okay, and I'll work on the mask refinement a little bit as well. So I'm going to brighten it. And let's see about the positioning of this one. We can flip it around and see if it's any better this way. This might be the one I used, actually. So be careful of sun placement. If you've got the sun in the sky, you would see shadows, right? So be careful of sun placement, that you don't put it in a sky that is not applicable. Kind of like that, actually. Yeah, let's do something like that. Right, now I want to look at the mask, and I'm going to do some relight as well. So relight helps to blend the sky. So if you use the relight strength, it takes the color from the sky and puts it into the image, okay? Like so. But let me work on this blending here, because you can see that it's not quite perfect. So you need to work on these sliders here, the mask refinement. The one that I find that works the best is fixed details. Right, let me just do that and see if it picks up more of the trees. Okay, but it's doing a pretty good job getting in there. Right. Right, it's doing a good job around that tree. So what I'm looking for is, are there any little gaps? Are there any little, white outlines or anything that it's missing? Right, so I can do closed gaps as well. So let's just check over here again. And like I said, keep in mind that the mask scene relighting helps, right? So when I increase relight, see how it affects everything, right? And if there's a human, it brightens the human as well, right? Global, you have to be careful of, because when you bring global up, see how it's picking up in here now? Global means it goes over the whole image more, okay? So be really careful with that one. Okay. This one actually looks pretty good the way it is. Let me see what it looks like. Ooh, look at that. Okay, so there's our sky. Now I did blur it. Okay, so if I want to not blur it, I can take that off. And there we go. Okay, now I'm going to do the vignette as the final step. And I might do a mystical, my usual. Okay, so I'm going to come in tighter on a vignette. And I want to put it right around the wheelbarrow. So move the position so it's like so. That's why I bring the feather down to 0. And then once I do that, we can adjust the amount. Okay, and a final mystical. Right. Let's see how close I came. I'm going to save this one and bring it back to Lightroom. And let's take a look at the one that I did in Luminar previously. So I used a different sky, obviously. It looks a little bit different. Okay, different variation. Looks like I went more antique this time. Let's take a look at some questions. Let's see. When you choose a preset, can you mask it so it only applies to a specific area and leaves the rest untouched? That is a great question. No, you can't, because it's applying to the whole image. You'd have to go through every single tool, do the mask once. You could do the mask on the first tool and then just copy and paste that mask, but you'd have to do that on all the tools. So being able to mask a preset, that's actually a really interesting idea. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I think I'll send that to them. Do you think the bright sky detracts a bit from the pumpkin? Yeah, a little bit. But in this case, I kind of was going for something spooky. And I feel like the orange in the sky balances with the orange of the pumpkins. So normally, yes. What can you do with the sky around the bottom of the bushes beside the shed? Ah, okay. I see that. Okay. I see what you're saying. It missed over here. Okay. Okay. Good question. So I've come back here. It looks like I did a better job of getting that sky on this version, but in the one I did here, what you could do is change the position of the sky. Okay, so I've still got this edit. Oh, guess what? It's the sky I told you not to use. That's funny. All right, so what I could do is change the sky positioning. Okay, so when I move it up and down, right? So think of like vertical position. Let me get back over here. So when I think of vertical position, can you see where it's the horizon or the edge of the image is? So yeah, I need to bring this down, but it's not picking up. It's not picking up over here, right? So that's the tricky part. And then I've lost that orange color. So you have to just bring it down and see if it will cover up in here, right? But it's not picking up those little bits. You could try it in Photoshop. I find that stuff like that is actually sometimes Photoshop does a better job and sometimes Luminar does a better job, right? But regardless, whatever I did on this one, it seems like there's a bit more color coming through there, right? So if I'm not happy with the sky here, remember how I said I went directly to Luminar? This is now a TIFF, so I can't re-edit it. I can't open it back in Luminar and change the Luminar settings, okay? That's the advantage of going to Photoshop, okay? So if I look at this now and go, oh, the sky is no good, I would have to go through the process again and take the whole thing back to Luminar and do all the edits again, right? Meaning I have to remember what I did. Or I could just say, well, let's just pick the sky here, right? Now you'll notice that if I set the mask to green, see, Lightroom doesn't pick that up either. See that? So Lightroom, whoa, that was bizarre. My mouse was not catching up to the green thing. Lightroom is not picking up that that's got sky down there either, right? But if I find that it's too vibrant, right, I can just bring the saturation down. Okay, so I can desaturate it. And I find like it's now a little too pink, so I can give it a little bit more green or something like that. Okay, so you can just mask it and bring the color down a little bit. Okay, like so. Okay, so there is the Lightroom edit, and then after Luminar. So I do a lot of this kind of thing where I finish an image with Luminar. Okay. She listed she had the same question. Awesome. Okay. Does that help the sky a little bit better, Lee? I think I've got one of your images too. Yes, I do. Okay, so let's do Lee's image. Is Deb here? I haven't seen Deb yet. Kelly's here. David, do we have David? Maybe he's gonna rewatch. So David sent an image, and I have not seen him send one before, so I'd love to do his image. Haven't seen AJ today, or Marty. Oh, Deb is here? Okay, so I can do hers as well. Oh, that was her image we just did. Sorry, is Lee here? Lee is who I was looking for. Lee. Oh, I've got another one of Deb's. Okay, so we did one of hers already. So let's do Lee's. So this one, I want to do a Lightroom edit actually. So let's do this one in Lightroom. And then we'll do a full edit in Luminar. Okay. Oh, you're here, Lee. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I am going to do one of yours, Lee. I'm going to do this one, but I will do that one in Luminar, right? So let's do that first, actually. So let's go here and let's do this one. Okay. So we can start with a preset again. He wants to put a little thing in my ear. Rob says he wants to get me like a little, Secret Service thing, or like the TV broadcasters have. He wants to get me a teleprompter and the whole thing, right? Because right now he's yelling at me through the floor. He just tells me, change your screen. Okay, so we could try a preset. Again, it's recommending urban style, which is weird because this is not urban at all. We can see what's in the landscapes. And I've talked about this before, but you don't have to stick to landscape presets if it's a landscape image, right? I mean, these may, look at that. Wow, like one preset. Sorry, I got distracted because that was a great preset. Look at that. You don't have to get stuck on just landscape presets, okay? I think that first one is the winner, right? This one is nice, but wow, look at long exposure. That looks great. I might just go with that. I'm going to apply this one and actually click it so it applies. There we go. And then I'm going to go back to my presets, which are portrait presets, and just show you the difference, right? So even though portrait presets have some things built into them that you wouldn't necessarily use for a landscape photo, such as it's probably got some face AI, some skin smoothing, and so on. But you can always just delete those tools or just turn them off, right? They're not going to do anything anyways, okay? So you could try those presets because there's other things in there, like some of the color toning and stuff. So let's see what some of these do. Okay, so it's just loading the last one, right? So for example, Sunset Magic, right? So punchy, where am I? There we go. Punchy black and white. Antique touch. See, that would have been good for the pumpkins, right? Low key, right? Glamour glow, so it glows the image. Ghoulish grunge, bokeh, right? So golden. So there's lots of things here that could still apply to a landscape, including, look at that, sunset magic. Okay, now the sunset here is out of focus, but I could fix that. I just added the blur slider when I applied the sky. So if I wanted this to turn into a sunset, I could just use this preset. Look at that. I mean, do we want this sky or do we want this sky? It sure changes the look completely, doesn't it? Okay, so it's not bad, but keep in mind, remember I talked about the sun and the direction. So if this sun was actually occurring for real in this image, we would have some shadows, right? Coming that direction. So this one is not the best sky, okay? Purple plant. Somebody is identifying the plants. Okay, so I'm going to go with the one that I chose, which was the long exposure, right? And then we're going to do some edits on top of that, okay? So let's just see what it's done. So there is develop raw, okay? So if we go back, remember if we go back to the bottom, all the other edits on top don't show. But when we go back here, now we have the camera profiles. So we can actually choose one of these, like landscape, right? So right out of the gate, we can see that it's punching up this image, right? So I'm just going to give it a little boost like so. Highlights down and shadows up. Let's do that. Okay. And I want to make sure that the chromatic aberration is checked off just in case. Always a good idea. Okay. And I can zoom in to see. Okay. Let's see if there's any chromatic aberration. So it would be like a little purple or green fringe. It looks like it's adding a purple fringe. Okay, I think this one is better. I try each of them because sometimes defringe works better than chromatic aberration. Okay, so I'm happy with the raw edits. Okay, then it applied Enhance AI, and that's where it's doing a nice job on the sky. This time I might dial this one down just a little bit, and this one up a little bit. Okay, so you can go through and adjust each one of these things. Now, it didn't apply foliage enhancer, so I could apply that. And remember, my rule of thumb is to go to -30 on the color scale if you apply foliage, because it's always, always, always too neon. And keep this one low, like under 10, right? Like so. Now, this dehaze slider is adding more punch too. See that? And you'll notice that it's applying mostly on the sky. Can you see that? So dehaze is a really smart slider that only grabs onto things that need that extra punch. So I'm going to take it higher, and now we've got more color in the sky. I don't think we need a sky replacement here. I think it's doing a great job. Right? Okay, well, let's see what it's doing under color. So it's shifted, looks like it's shifted the greens a little bit to yellow, okay, which is, I think, is a good thing. And it's desaturated the greens a little bit. I might even go a little bit further and desaturate the yellows, because you'll find that yellow is kind of objectionable as well. So I like to bring the yellow down just a little bit. And if you've been watching, if you watched me before using this particular tool, HSL, what I'll do is I'll take the green slider on the luminance tab, make the greens a little darker and make the yellows a little brighter, and it actually brings out a difference of tone in the foliage. Can you see that? Like so, right? And then we've got color harmony. Now, it did not use my favorite. It actually added brilliance, which is adding more saturation, which I'm going to go the other way, because for me, it's getting a little too neon. So I'm going to go the other way. And then I'm going to use the color contrast and just see what we can get. Okay, so we can increase our color contrast in the yellows and greens, right? Which, if you're on the yellow area, it will also darken the blues, okay? So that's going to give us more contrast in the yellow, green, right? Or we can go the opposite way. But this, let's see what it's doing on the, it's kind of bringing out these purple flowers, and it's doing a nice job on the sky. Okay, so remember that you can mask this too, right? Like, look what it's doing on the sky. And we can decide that we want to shift it as well. So you can see that the cool colors are in the sky, right? So we could shift it to get more blue, warm colors, right? Or I could decide I only want this on the sky. I'm going to dial it back a little bit. And we could just do mask AI. And when it comes up, just choose the sky. Let's see. I'm going to come back here. I see there's a question. I will come back to that in a moment. I'm just going to choose sky. It got most of the sky. I could go in and mask that a little better if I want, but I don't think it's critical, because I may end up getting rid of these trees anyways. Okay, so see, it's doing a nice job on that. Okay. Super contrast. I like to just see what these are all doing. affecting the sky again. Okay. Vignette. Let's see. I want to see how big this vignette is because it's not really doing anything, is it? That's not bad. I'm going to darken it a little bit more. So I get a little bit darker on the edges, like so. And maybe even a little smaller. And that's the edits for the preset. So I went through and re-edited or tweaked all of the preset settings. Okay. But look at the difference, right? Kind of blah. And now we got color and punch. We don't need a sky replacement here at all. Okay. This one I am thinking about flipping, right? So let's take a look at the cropping on this one, and then we'll deal with the power lines, okay? So cropping, right? If we flip this one, I've tried it both ways, and I'm undecided. Okay, so this one, I feel like the path is coming into the picture this way, and you kind of follow the red, like you follow these purple things into the image, and then you sort of come back around. So you kind of stay in like this, versus this way, your eye kind of comes here and you're stuck. There's kind of a sticky tree here, and then you go out of the image this way. So I'm kind of leaning towards this. Any thoughts? The purple things, right? Kind of leaning towards this. I definitely want to make sure the horizon is straight as well. So I'm not sure I agree with that. But let's just see. I think it's hard to tell where the horizon is, so I might just go with the fence to look at the vertical line of this fence post here. So I'm like, okay, let's make the fence vertical. That looks about right. Okay. And now I want to decide, do I want to get rid of some of this tree here? I kind of do. So I'm going to want to come in a little bit more just to get rid of that part here. Because these guys are just distracting, right? They're on the edge of the frame and they're not really framing to keep the eye in. And this one that's going across the path, they really want that one out of the way. It's really tricky to get rid of unless you're using some AI editing, right? So I want to, there, that looks better. I'm still trying to get this straight, right? Now that I've moved it, that looks better, right? So let's try that. Ed says, are you storing all these photo examples in both Lightroom and Neo catalogs so to easily decide which program is going to be solely used? What I do is I import them into Lightroom, Ed. So they're all here in Lightroom, and Luminar recognizes those folders, so it just shows up there. I don't have to even import them into Luminar. I just put them into the folders that are already added to Luminar, and if they're already indexed, if I put an image in that folder, here, let me show you an example. Okay, so let me just go back here to, okay, so this is, for example, I just made a harvest folder, okay? So I'm in the harvest folder, and what I did was I had some that were in landscape, and I just dragged them over, right? So, for example, if I take one of these back to landscape, okay, I'm just going to drag this one back. So anything that I do in Lightroom applies in real time on the hard drive. Okay, guess what? Now that one is gone, and it's over here in landscape. Okay, so they're different in the way that when you do something in Luminar, it does apply on the hard drive, but Lightroom doesn't automatically pick it up, whereas the opposite is true. If I do something in Lightroom, Luminar picks it up. Okay, slightly different. If it's a folder that it already is indexing. Okay. All right, let's deal with these power lines. So I'm going to do remove power lines. This is in the erase tool, remember. Okay. What was the wow about, Lee? What did you say wow about? Just the punchiness of the image from before and after? And that started with the preset, and I just tweaked it a little bit. So that was that long exposure preset, and it was in the standard landscape set. So you've got this image. Give this a try and see if you can replicate the same steps. After the live, go back and watch it again. Before and after. Okay. All right. So now, look, it's done a really good job on the power lines. I don't even see them. I think it's gotten a lot better. They used to be like you'd see a little faded out version. I don't see them at all. Gone. Okay. Now I could go and get rid of these trees as well, which I might do. I'm not a fan of this tree on the edge here, so let's just see. I kind of do these in bits. Like I wouldn't just do the whole tree. I might do part of it because I find that it does a better job when you go slow. Okay. It's doing pretty good. Okay. And this one here might be tricky because it's sort of touching the other tree. I might get a double tree. I knew something like that would happen. Let me just do it again. So we keep going. Might have to get rid of it with a clone tool. Okay, it's still there on the edge. We might have to clone it out, but that's not bad. Okay, so now it's much simplified the image, right? So we've got before and after, right? I still want to draw the eye more in. For me, the subject is this area right in here with the gate and the purple flowers, right? So I want to bring the eye in a bit more. So I'm going to either use another vignette or do some dodging and burning. What I might do actually is develop. So before there was dodging and burning tool in Luminar, I was using the develop tool, and I'll bring the exposure down. I'll bring the highlights down and the blacks, okay? Possibly even the whites. Okay, so what you'll see is you'll start to get a darkened version of everything. And of course, I only want that on the outer edge, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a radial gradient and just do something like that. Oops, no. I rotated myself here. Let's make it a little rounder. And I want it centered around this area, remember? Okay. So where the mask shows red is where it's going to apply. Now, obviously, that's too far, but I went fairly far because I can dial it back from here. Okay, so I wanted to see how far I could go with it. Let's take the whites back up. But can you see the difference? Like, see what it's doing? Right? And it's so subtle. I'm going to dial everything back just a tiny bit, but I really do want to bring that down. Okay. I can also lower the saturation a little bit on the outer areas. Right? So the flowers out here and the trees out here and the sky, okay, see the difference? If I do it really subtle, your eye, remember your eye goes to those four things? Let me put that on the screen. Your eye goes to those four things again, right? So if I can bring these four things to the subject and take it away from the edge or the background, right? I'm lowering the brightness of the edge. I'm lowering the color and the contrast. And I can also lower the sharpness, right? Because I'm in the develop here, but I've got this one. I can't do minus sharpness, but I can copy and paste this mask, okay? So if I like this mask, I can copy it, right? And then I can go in and do blur. So now we have blur, right? Or I could just do details. What I'll do is details or minus structure. Okay, so structure AI, if we go all the way, you'll see you end up with something that looks like, you know, blob, of course. But I'm just going to paste it in so you can see. And then like that. Okay, so on the edge. And then just dial it back to something where I'm just subtly blurring those bits on the edge. Okay. Again, it's very subtle. I still feel like the greens are a little bit too vibrant, so I might go back into the color tool here and dial them down a little bit more, or even the saturation overall. I still feel like it's a little bit too punchy, right? Look at the difference. -8 on the saturation just takes away that neon feel, right? Like so. And we could do a LUT or something on here, but honestly, I don't think it needs it. I would probably just do a little bit of mystical, I like to go about 20. And I kind of like just the default, but you can play with the shadows a little bit if you want less shadows and brighten it up, right? But we went to all this trouble to add the shadows, so I don't want to do that. But just around 15, right? A little bit of mystical. I would probably take all of these trees out myself. They do bug me, so I would probably erase the trees that are sticking out over the horizon like this. Let's see how good a job it does. That's not bad. I mean, it kind of erased the mountain, but let's just see if I can build it back in. There we go. That's not bad, right? I find that if you just do like 1 or 2 dots, you'll do pretty good. But you notice that I'm zoomed into 100% now, right? Watch out for duplications. So if it makes a duplicate pattern, try and fix that, right? You don't want duplicates of the same cloud multiple times. I'm just going to do that whole area and see what it does. That's not bad. All right, now I still got this thing on the left over here. Now I got a weird thing sticking out. Yeah, I just keep doing it until I get something I like. I got all these little mini branches here. That's not bad. Okay, now get rid of this one. If the erase tool is not doing its job here, we can go to the clone tool. Okay, so it's kind of getting rid of it, but not totally. Yeah, I keep getting it back again. So I'm just going to undo that. And I'm going to go to the cloning tool at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to clone with about 60% opacity and a fairly large brush. And I'm just going to click over here to get the source, right? And then I'm cloning from there over to here. See how it just lowered the opacity? Then I'm going to make my brush smaller and then just do another pass. Okay, so I'm just keeping them sort of horizon level adjusted there. Okay? And I could get rid of this guy too, right here. See how the edge is soft? So if I want to solve that, right, I just have to go with a harder edge brush. But now, of course, I've got the trees. So what I would do then is clone from here and just put the trees back. See that? There we go. And I made a mess. Something like that. Okay, so if I want another branch, I could do another branch. That looks not too bad. Okay, so I've just cleaned up that stuff on the right now and punched up the contrast. Right? Big difference, right? Sheila says, is it better to use develop than dodge and burn? And Lisa but she prefers develop to dodge and burn. I do as well. I'll come back to your other question, Lee, about the new source for the clone tool. I like the develop tool better as well because with dodge and burn, all you can do is lighten and darken. With develop, you can adjust the color, you can adjust the contrast, you can adjust curves, you can do the white balance. And so there's other things that you can do besides just exposure, right? Okay, so your question about how did I get the new source for the clone tool? Okay, let me go back to that. Okay, so I'm just going to open it again. I'm just going to do a couple of nonsensical things here just so you can see what it's doing. So when you first open the tool, it gives you that little circle and crosshairs. So wherever you click, that's your source. And then, of course, wherever you move it to, right? I'm going to paint sky out down here into the forest, okay? If I want a new source, I just hold the Alt Option key, put it over where I want to be the new source, click, and now I'm painting from there, okay? So just Alt Option. Okay. So I think we're done that one, right? So before, and it was flipped, and after. So it's very dramatic. So it's a very dramatic transformation of a landscape image using Luminar Neo and all of the tools. We used a preset, we tweaked all the preset settings. We did not change the sky, but we enhanced the existing sky that you couldn't even see. And we punched up a bunch of the colors and removed the power lines and a few other trees. So I think it's print ready. What do you guys think? We did add, we said we are doing next Wednesday, same time. And then we are going to the following Sunday. So October 4th and October 15th are the next 2 dates. And the time for the 15th, we haven't announced yet, but we'll announce that next week. So it'll probably be either 1 or 2 p.m. Mountain Time. Okay. So a few hours earlier than usual, but on the Sunday. We don't want to cut into dinner time on Sunday. Okay, let's go back to here. Oops. There we go. And I want to do this one because is AJ here? I haven't seen him. I want to do this one because this one was sent in by David Grenda, and I've not seen a submission from him before. So I'd like to do this image for him. So let's do that. And he uses Luminar. So his question was, how can I enhance the fog? Okay. So the fog is really cool, right? And there's the atmosphere tool in Luminar that we can use to add more fog if we want, right? I'm going to go back to the presets. I seem to be having a good luck with presets today. So let's just see what we got here. Right. So keep in mind, like the presets is a good starting point, especially if the image is well exposed and you don't have to do a lot of sort of corrections to it. Use the preset to start. Absolutely. Okay, so it's still loading them. Here we go. So dynamic result. Oh my goodness, that's really dynamic. No, don't want black and white, I don't think. A little too much. No. So far, I'm not sort of digging these ones. I know what this one looks like. I've seen Night's Thunder before, and I don't think it's kind of a faded out one. I don't think it's going to be what I like, but yeah. It's actually really cool, but it's changing the sky. So I don't want to change the sky. Let's see what else. We've got waterscapes. This is one of the minor drawbacks here of the presets is it takes a moment for them all to load because it's going to give you a preset or a preview of each of them. So you do have to kind of be patient. And that one's not bad, actually. Actually, that one is too. So deep focus. See how I'm looking at the fog. I'm looking at the fog specifically and which one is bringing out the fog. But that one is not bad at all. We could probably work with that. Okay, so it's done some nice things. I'm going to start with that. Let's just see what happens if we dial it down a little bit. Because it's gone a little bit too contrasty. Let's start about there. So I'm at about 70, right? So if we just look at the before and after, it's fixing some of the lightness problems. So let's start there. Again, I could just start from there and not even look at the other edits, or I could go back here and make sure that things like chromatic aberration have been checked off and so on. Okay? There may not even be an issue on this one. I'm just looking to see. No, I don't see. You'd see a fringe along the edge. Okay. So there was smart contrast applied here. Okay. I can use the J key to see any clipping. I'm going to bring the contrast down a little bit, as well as highlights down, and then exposure up. So remember, exposure is midtones. Okay. I'm not going to worry about this too much if that top area gets too bright because it's going to have a vignette. And I may even crop it into a little bit more of a pano. We'll see in a moment. Let's see if we have any camera profiles that stand out while we're here. Portrait, natural. See, natural actually does a nice job. Vivid's a little too much for me, but let's go with natural, right? So doing the edit here, we fixed the develop settings. Why it's applying denoise, I am not sure, but I guess it's adding sort of something to the fog. I'm not even sure what it's doing here. Oh, there is a little bit of noise. Yeah, it's all right. Right, enhance AI. Let's see what that's doing. Definitely good on the sky for sure. Okay, color. Notice it's taking the vibrance down. I'm going to darken the blues. So I'm going to go to luminance and bring the blues down. See how that's applying nicely. I'm going to bring the vibrance up just a tiny bit more. And I'm going to shift the green. So remember, shifting the color is hue. Just a little bit towards the yellow side. Like so. Okay, what has applied in color harmony? So it looks like it's, again, adding more brilliance. So it took vibrance down and then added brilliance, which doesn't make any sense to me. For me, I'm going to try these sliders. It makes more sense to use these guys, right? So if we want to darken the sky, I want to be somewhere in this range, right? Like that. That's lightening that patch of green, but that's all right. Has it done anything here? I always just want to see what it's doing. So it looks like it just did the vibrance here. So I'm actually going to warm it up a tiny bit. Like so. Look at what it's doing to the rocks here. So if I increase this, we actually get like a little bit of warmth coming through. Watch the rocks as I bring the slider to the right. So there is some pink or red in the sky. And as I bring this one up, it's bringing out a bit of that color. So that's interesting. I don't mind that. Okay, we've got some weird color happening there in the sky. Did that happen here? Yes. Okay, so one thing you want to be careful of is I'm getting some weird kind of almost banding up here. So what I'm going to do is mask it off of that area. So I'm just going to do a big old erase right up in here. So I don't want it on this corner. Okay? Don't want it on this cloud. So it's doing things nice down here, not so much up here. Okay? I might even just lower it a little bit there. So you can lower the saturation or lower the strength of the erase brush, right? So what I'm seeing in terms of seeing the mask, we show the mask, right? It's applying everywhere except here. And then I lowered the opacity here. Okay? From here, I'm going to do a crop, and I want to make sure that it's straight. I feel like it's tilting again. So I'm going to use this line as the horizon. Let's see what it thinks if I just click horizon. That's about what I was thinking as well. See if I go even further. I'm looking at that line here, okay? Because if that's a lake, the lake would be sitting flat, right? I'm going to change this to free. Where are we? Free at the top here. So I can do a freeform custom. And I'm going to take some of this cloud off the top because this big white area on the top draws your eye. And I don't want to keep my eye up there. I want to keep the eye down here in the fog. So again, where you place your horizon, right? Right now it's fairly middle. If I come down, now we're starting to, it's still in the middle. If I want more, I could really come down, right? So now my horizon is here, right? So I have less on the bottom. I'm trying to get it not so much in the middle. I'm going to go something like that. Okay, so we've got rid of that upper right corner. We can do a vignette as well. And we can also enhance that fog. And I'm going to show you how to do that, which is what was the original question. Okay, so I'm going to bring, remember when you crop, this is another thing that is still to come. When you crop, the vignette is off center. It's based on the original image. So you have to remember to come in a little bit if you want it centered, right? I've got a sleeping cat in my office here. She's quite comfortable. See how subtle that is? You don't want it to be noticeable, but you want it to affect the image so that the eyes come in. Okay. Okay, the fog. I'm going to take a guess here. We could play with details, or we could go straight to glow. If I use the actual glow setting in the glow tool, anything that is white is going to glow. Okay, so we can make it softer or not. Okay, I can give it more contrast, and I can even make it warmer. Okay, so let's just take it to extreme. Let's see what it's doing. Okay, so it's kind of giving everything that is white, like the fog, a bit more of a glow. Again, it's making that cloud at the top glow, but that's an easy fix. I can just do a linear gradient, and I'll just put it right here because I only want it to apply up to there, and it will not affect the top corner. Okay, so see how that's bringing the fog out? Okay, so that's glow. And if we want to give it more structure, we could use structure. And again, we can apply it just to the fog. So do we want misty fog, or do we want more sort of defined fog? You get to decide. But you see how it's changing the look of the fog, right? This one kind of almost looks like a long exposure, right? And you could just paint it over the fog. This one gives a little more like steamy look. So I think what I might do is go with this one and just brush it in at 50%. And I'm just going to do like one pass across the middle here. Maybe another one, right? So see, it's just giving that little bit of punch in the middle, right? Right on the horizon, like that. See that? And what else? I don't want to do a sky replacement. We could do Mystify or Mystical. We can also try the new Neon Glow. So this is the one that literally just came out today, right? And you apply this one by dragging it up, and it's going to apply a neon glow around what it thinks is the subject, okay? Well, this is neon. Okay, so there's a difference between neon and the glow, okay? So I'm not sure where it's, so refine object. So right now it's not giving me anything, but if I want neon, I can just draw it in, right? So that's not what I want. So I'm gonna bring that back here. Okay, so neon is not what I want. I want the glow. So you have to go to the second tab, glow. Now we can have an inner or an outer glow. Okay, so let's try outer. And again, see what it's picking, right? But I can refine the object. So I'm just going to draw it along the fog. Okay. Hopefully. Did it go? There we go. Okay, so now that I've drawn it along this area here, okay, now I can decide, okay, how much glow do we want? Do we want a color? Do we want, if I bring this down here to whiteness, we get more color. So we can actually make it a blue glow or a magenta glow. So glow has actually quite a few uses. I've already seen some bizarre ones on the internet being used, but you could literally add a glow to the fog. So we're kind of expanding the fog a little bit. Okay, see that? So just options, right? Just options. I want to do another final darkening of everything. So I'm going to show you another little trick to do that. We could use the develop tool again, but I feel like I want to darken almost everything except that fog. So I'm going to duplicate the layer. Okay, so pressing D on your keyboard will give you a duplicate layer, exactly the same with all the same edits. Okay, you can even see it's cropped the same. When you change the blend mode to multiply, it's going to darken everything, right? But now I have the ability to adjust the opacity, so I don't have to be at 100%, right? But look what it's doing on the fog. Like, how cool is that? I think it's actually really cool. So I might even just leave it at around. Actually, I'm going to leave it a little bit darker because I'm paying attention to the sky and the water. Okay, so I'm going to leave it a little darker, and then I'm just going to take it off of the fog again. I'm going to erase at about 30% with a big brush. And I'm just going to do one pass across the middle. Right. So now if we look at this one, okay, so that's without and with. Okay. So I can get really specific in targeting that fog. I could also erase it one more pass. If I go get a little smaller brush like that, right across the middle. Okay. If you want to see what it looks like without this slider, you can just do hide layer over here. I'm just right clicking it. Okay, so that's the original. And after the second layer. Okay, so it's just a quick way to darken everything. I would do that at the very end after I've done all the other edits. So let's take a look at the before and after. So before and after. Do you agree that we've brought the fog out? Right? The fog is glowing, like it literally has a glow twice. So we used two different glow tools on it, right? And then we duplicated the layer. Everybody remember to hit that like button on like notification. So you give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Most of you, I'm sure, have. Okay, question. Is it possible to change green leaves into fall colors? Cat, Luminar, cat orange whistling. I'm not sure what you mean by cat orange whistling. Is that an image that you sent me? I don't have that one, but yes, you can do that. I'm going to be doing a video, Lee. There's lots of better uses for the glow tool than what I've seen in some of the groups and so on so far. I used it on an image that I did. I showed last week of a wrestler that I photographed and just gave her a red glow around her just to separate her from the background. And also there's one where you can actually add sparkles. So we can put sparkles. We can put sparkles in the glow here. Let's just look at that just for fun. Under the glow, see there's sparkles down here. Oh, this one doesn't have it turned on. Why doesn't this one have it turned on? Oh, because we're on the outer glow. Ah, it's an inner glow for sparkles. That's interesting. Oh, no, here we go. So if I turn on the sparkles, it should be, why is it not showing me this? Yeah, so it's already got the subject defined. Okay, so if I do sparkles, I don't know if you can see it or not. You see it's down here. You can literally see sparkles. You can literally see sparkles here. I don't know if you can see that. See that? Those are the sparkles. So if you want sparkly fog, that's part of the glow tool as well. I'm not a fan of sparkles on there, but it's there. And again, had some application on the image that I did. So, okay. Let's see. Somebody asked about changing the colors of the leaves. Okay. Let's go back to this one because I think I'll be able to do that here. So if we want to change the colors of the leaves, It's actually not that difficult. You just go to the color tool and hue, and we shift the greens. We shift the greens towards yellow, and we shift the yellow to orange. That's it. Just like that. So all you got to do is shift the hues, right? You can even shift your oranges to more yellow, right? See that? So you're just shifting the colors like so. So yes, you can. I hope that answers your question. How did we do? Let's see. Do we have time for one more? Let's do one more. Okay, so we did that one, we did that one, we did that one, we did that one. Let's do AJ's. We've already did one of Deb's. Okay, so we'll do a full Lightroom edit on this one. Okay, so this is a Nikon RAW file. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is there's a lot of contrast, and there's a big black area here and a big white area here. If I press the J key, there's nothing clipping. So there's detail there, right? Like if I bring the highlights down and the shadows up, right, you can see that there is detail there. But the question becomes, do I want to do something like this? Right? So when you push the highlights and the shadows to such degrees like this, right, you end up with something that just doesn't look believable, or you end up with something that looks like what I call neon puke, right? Because that does not look normal at all, right? And of course, I've taken, clarity and texture and whatnot to ridiculous levels, right? So the way that I would edit this image is a little bit different. So I'm going to start again with the camera profile, and I'm going to find one that has less contrast to begin with. Okay, so see how neutral lightens up those shadows right off the bat. Okay, so I think I'm going to be going with neutral. These are all monochrome. If flat is a little too flat, I'm going to go with neutral. Okay, so it's just lightening up the shadows ever so slightly. Okay, then I'm going to use exposure because I want to affect the mid-tone. See how the histogram is all pushed over there. Oh, it's over there. It's all pushed to the, which way is left? It's all pushed to the left, right? It's all pushed to the left. Sorry, I'm seeing myself backwards. I don't know which way I'm looking here. So it's all pushed to the left, meaning there's lots of dark tones. So I'm going to increase exposure, which is mid-tones, and see how immediately that's already, look at the difference, right? You can see there's detail there in that shadow, right? There's detail there, right? Now I'm going to do the shift double click on the whites and the blacks. So even though I brightened that up, right, I'm still seeing detail. I'm going to bring the shadows up a little bit more, but not too far. And the highlights down, but not too far, right? I find the whole image is a little on the blue side as well. So I'm going to choose a preset of daylight, and it looks a little green. Usually it's magenta, but it looks a little green. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit more, somewhere in this range, because I know that these rocks are not blue. They're probably some sort of brownish color, right? So that looks a little better, right? Now, the other thing is the waterfall and composition. We're actually going to do an entire lesson 1 week on cropping, just cropping. So I think maybe that's what we're going to do, not next week. Next week, we're actually going to do landscape again. Or no, we're doing forest. Sorry, we're going to do forest again because I've got a lot of leftover forest images from the last time that you guys submitted forest images. So we're going to do forest next week. Don't have to send any images. I've got lots. And the week after that, we might do cropping. So I'm going to think about that because I talk about that a lot. And starting point with cropping is probably one of the most important things you can get right. So let's talk about cropping on this one. Okay, so look at the rule of thirds. The waterfall is smack dab in the middle, right? Now, where do you want the person to look? The waterfall, right? But is there some nice lines? There's a nice line here, okay? And a scene like this, you probably don't want to flip because it's a recognizable scene if you know where this is and what waterfall this is. But I'm going to go, I'm I'm going to go off aspect ratio and just kind of play around with it just to see what works best. I want to get rid of like a third of this image almost because it's just all black, right? I'm going to come into about there. So I want to leave a black edge, right? And I might come in a little bit from the bottom. So that actually looks like, if I do reset it, if I keep the cropping to the original crop, I'm going to hold down the shift key. Oops. I come from the bottom, not from the top. No, it's not quite the same aspect ratio. So I'm going to give it a little more on the bottom here. Something like that. So I've kind of got this little pool at the bottom and a dark edge there. Okay, see the difference immediately, right? Now the other thing we can do, this is really bright, right? This is really bright. We've got a little bit of clipping in the water, so I'm going to dial that back a little bit. We'll do a little bit of clarity. We'll do a little bit of texture. But what I want to do is I want to add clarity and texture into the water and kind of take it away from this wall, right? So I'm going to do a mask. I'm going to do a basic medium edge vignette. So that's just my preset. Okay, so see where we are so far. Okay. Now I want to affect the waterfall. So the best way to do that is I could think about how the masks work. I could do a radial gradient, or I could do a luminance range. Okay. So if I only want to affect the water, I'm going to say, well, I just want stuff that's that bright. Right. Now, obviously, I got everything else. Right. But if I say intersect that with the subject, let's see if it picks the waterfall as the subject. Fingers crossed. No, it did not. Oh, did I do it? Oh, I don't think I did it. Intersect with subject. There we go. It's selecting. Okay. So it's got a little bit up here still as well, right? So if I want to add clarity to the water, but not up here, that's not working so great. So I'm actually going to just undo these and I'm going to try a different route. I'm going to go radial gradient and just draw it over the areas that I want. Make it a little bigger. Turn it. Okay, so I just want this area. So as long as I'm just affecting the highlights, now I can say intersect that with a luminance range and choose that brightness. Okay, see now it's chosen only the whites within the radial gradient that I drew. Okay, so it's going only within the circle. So that's what intersect means, that it must fit both criteria. Okay, so now I want to add some, oops, where are we? There we go. I want to add some texture. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see the water. And this was done with a long exposure. I'll come back to the exposure in a minute. Add some clarity. I might even add some dehaze. No, not too much of that. And so I'm just bringing a little more detail out of that water. Can you see that? If I add black, see how it starts to bring out the sort of flow of the water? Okay. So I'm going to name this mask Waterfall. And let's see what the exposure was here. 13 seconds. Okay, so 13 seconds is a pretty long exposure, and you will get that flowing water. If you're doing waterfalls, I haven't mentioned any articles for you to link to tonight, Rob. If you could please link to photographing waterfalls, I think we have a couple of them, or long exposures. I find for moving water, if you're between about 2 and 6 seconds, you get enough of that sort of milky waterfall kind of look. And if you go further than that, it starts to turn into mush. So if you're photographing a subject like this, try different exposures. Try some at 2 seconds, try some at 6, try some at 12, like this, okay? And when you're doing that, if you have a neutral density filter, you'll be able to adjust it just by dialing in if you have a variable one, okay? I see there's a question about how I would treat this photo in Neo. I would do exactly the same things, just using the different tools, right? So I would use develop, change the camera profile, add a vignette, crop it, all the same way, right? I would probably finish this one with Mystify as well. Okay, so now I've done the water. Now I want to affect the rocks. Okay, so now range, but this time color range. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of draw a box over the rocks. And once you do that, you can get a little bit more specific. I think I drew my box too big. There we go. Okay, that's better. Okay, so now I've got the rocks. Okay, so what I'm looking for here is I want to actually go the opposite way and dial the texture down a little bit, or we could actually punch it up. So you get to decide, right? If you want really crunchy rocks next to that smooth water, that might be cool, okay? So I can add more texture to the rocks this way, right? Let's see which one we like better. So that's more clarity and texture. This is less. What do we think? Compared to the water, do we like more texture? I think maybe. My initial thought was lower the texture in the rock, but I think sort of that juxtaposition between the two is actually kind of nice. And I'll just darken this one on the left a bit more. So I kind of like that. So I'm going to call this one rocks. So there we are so far. Okay. And now I want to darken pretty much everything on this side here. So I'm going to use a radial gradient, so another mask. And I'm just going to get a really big one. Okay. I want to cover the waterfall and the top corner like this. And then I'm going to invert it because I want the opposite. Okay. Maybe a little bit less feathering, a little bit less feathering. We'll see that. Okay, so I want to get, I'm going to make sure I don't get the water. Something like that. Okay, now I want to darken. I'm going to bring the highlights down. So let's see what that's doing. It's just bringing attention away from the edges. So the edges of your image, if you could bring attention away from the edges, your eye will go into the middle. Okay, and a little bit more black. So see how powerful this particular vignette is. Let me move it out of the road again. Okay. So off, on, off, on. Okay. Now if I want to, I can actually add this rock here, because right now I'm not darkening that rock, but I could add this rock and just either brush it in, right? So I could lower the density and just brush it in with a little bit of brushwork. So just see that? Just darken it a little bit. Like so. Make sure I get this one. And get these dies down here. Okay. So I've just added that. So I can call that edge darken. So it's just a custom vignette, basically. Right. And if I want to do another mask and lighten up this part of the waterfall, I can, because that one's pretty dark. This guy's getting in my road over here. So shadows, maybe a little bit of exposure. I don't want to go too far because that doesn't look realistic. It's in the shade, so it would be darker. Okay, so a little bit of shadows, something like that. Okay, so just a subtle lightening. Like so. How's that? Okay, so let's see our before. Very dark, very contrasty, kind of blue. Warmed it up a whole bunch. Now we see the waterfall, right? I still feel like there's lots of busyness around the waterfall. I'm still debating on the whole clarity thing. Okay, so I've got an edge darken. I'm going to do another radial filter. Actually, I want to duplicate this one. So I'm just going to duplicate edge darken. So darkened it again. So it took the same settings. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to undo that because what I want to do is actually lower, I'm going to blur it a little bit. So I'm going to take the sharpness down, texture down, and I'm going to make this, delete the brush. I'm just going to make this radial bigger. Right. Now, if you want to go off the image more, you just have to, I just zoomed out. Okay. So I want to see where my mask is showing up. So it's just kind of blurring the edges. Oops. What did I do? What the heck did I do? Oh, did I invert it? What on earth did I do? Oh, I made another one somehow. How did I do that? All right, let's go back to this one. I must have hit a shortcut. That was interesting. Okay, so I'm just want to get a little bit of softness on the edges. Okay, so let's see what that's doing. So we still have texture in the rocks right immediate to the waterfall, but now we're softening the edge a bit more. Okay, so I did that by lowering the texture and the clarity and the sharpness. Okay. I just felt like there was too much going on around that image. So there's our before, and after. Okay. Now I feel like we've gotten some weird stuff going on in the sky here. Aha, something weird went on in the sky here. See that? So you got to watch for weird stuff happening. See how there's this line here? Something on one of the masks created that line. So I got to figure out which one is doing that. I have a feeling it's the rocks. No, it's that one. Okay, so edge darken. So edge darken, whatever the case. Okay, so there's that radial. It's doing something weird there. So I could just take that up a little more. No, it's still doing it. Definitely there's something in there that is doing it. What is doing it? Okay, it's that darken. There we go. Okay, so I lowered the blacks. Something in there. So you got to find where you're getting this weird thing happening and then figure out how to solve it. Right? So I darken the edges. Aha. See that? That's weird. When I painted over the rocks, see there? Okay. There's my problem. Okay, so I'm going to turn the brush down to 0 and unpaint it on the sky. So I want to make sure I'm not getting the sky when I do that one. Okay, so make sure you don't get weird stuff. Now, our sky is fine. So look for things like that. Look for banding. Look for any kind of errors that show up like that, and then figure out what caused it. So all I did was turn off each one of the masks till I found which one it was doing that, and it was the brush that I added extra where I painted over some of the rocks. So then I just fixed the brush. Okay. Do I have a preset idea of what you want the photo to look like, or do you adjust as you go? No, it's not a silly question at all. That is actually probably one of the most common questions. I would say both, right? A little bit of both. In this one, I knew immediately that I wanted to brighten the dark area and crop it. I knew I was going to crop because of that dark area on the right. And I also knew that it was really blue. So I had an idea of the direction I wanted to go. And I knew that I wanted to bring out the waterfall and keep it more natural looking, right? With the image of the pumpkin, for example, I knew that I wanted to, that one's in here as well. I knew that I wanted to create more of a fall look, something maybe sort of antique-y. And so orange and green were going to be my main colors. So I did have in my head an idea of what I wanted to do with this one before I set out. Right? With the one with the fog, right? The person who submitted it said he wanted to bring the fog out more, so that's what I did. Okay, so that one was the user's idea, the photographer's idea, but I probably would have done the same. Okay, because the fog is really the cool part. With this one, I knew that I just wanted to punch it up and bring out the colors, bring out the sky. And from here, I mean, you could take this another total direction. We could add a lot. We could do something completely different, or we could turn it into fall, like somebody else asked about. Okay, so a combination of I have an idea what I want it to look like, and sometimes I'll use a preset in Luminar Neo and get something unexpected, and then go that direction. And let's just do a quick example. For example, this one here, right? It always gives you a suggestion of which presets to use, right? So it's giving us urban style. I don't know why. But easy landscape, these are some really common ones. Everybody has these ones. They're all part of Luminar Neo. And long exposure is the one I used. So look at that. Amazing. You can see why I haven't favored it, because it's a great preset, right? But you could just play with these and see, and you might go, oh, I like black and white on this one. And maybe you hadn't thought about that, right? So just seeing a black and white, there's one that's kind of faded out. So the presets can give you ideas of something that you might not have considered doing, or taking it in a direction that you might not have considered, right? Clear and sharp. Now that one's kind of cool because it really brings out the burnt wood. So the photographer told me that this was a fire, right? And he was trying to photograph and capture the fire. Right? Simple, clear skies. These ones are all pretty straightforward. Now that one has a sky replacement. So notice, even though it's way in the background, look what a great job Neo would do on the sky replacement here. And I actually don't mind that, because it brings you these colors. Now you have this green and this yellow and then this blue that really work together. They're really complementary, right? So I don't mind that at all. So I wouldn't have considered a sky replacement on this one. And just by clicking or hovering over that preset, I might go that direction with this image now. Does that help? So not a silly question at all. My teachers used to tell me that the only silly questions are the ones you don't ask, right? Because you'll never get an answer. So I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. We've got to get our supper. Next week, same time, we're going to do forest images again. So you'll see more of the same, a little bit more trees. I might put the burnt forest back in the forest collection, and we'll see you the following week. I think Rob missed this because you stepped out for a moment, but we still talked about doing 1 week where we do just cropping and just talk about cropping and how to crop and why to crop, and the importance of it and how much impact it can make on your images. So we might do that, and just you can send random images for that. So keep that in mind. Think about what images you aren't sure how to crop, and we'll work on that submission for October 15th. For next week, we'll see you again, same place, same time. You don't have to do anything. If you want to send a forest image, you can, but I've got lots left over. So we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lee. I'm glad you liked the edit on your image. Thanks, Deb. Yours was fun too, the pumpkins. I love the pumpkins. So have some fun with that image. All right. Take care, everyone.